Hey there YouTube, welcome back for another Indomitus painting video. This week taking a look at painting the Skorphek Lord, obviously from the Indomitus box set. Now I've gone ahead and finished off the base for this, so the base is already done, minus a few tufts of grass and bits and pieces here and there, and I went ahead and primed the Lord in the metallic silver spray paint that I've used on all of my Necrons so far, and keeping in the the theme of the army, I'm now glazing over with some Screaming Bell. This is thinned down just with water to obviously a very thin consistency, pretty much for a glaze, and starting about 2/3 of the way up each armour piece, I'm just bringing this down in one single brush stroke to get a nice even coat on there, and then as that dries I'll then come back over it, starting slightly lower down, and essentially I'm building that up to about 50% opacity on the bronze itself, or the Screaming Bell. So I'll do this on all of the sort of the main plate armor pieces, this being obviously the three sort of stabby pointy feet things that he's got. Here's obviously the legs for those, his main chest piece, his arms and sort of the arms for his weapons and things like that, and then everything else in terms of body armor will be done in the next stage. So I'll just get on with this, and then we can show you how I'm choosing to make this model stand out a little bit more from the from the standard painting that I've done with the Necron warriors, and that I'll be doing with the Skorpheks themselves, just to add a little bit more detail and texture to the model here. So we'll be back in just a bit. Okay, so next up for the Screaming Bell, I'm now using a slightly more opaque version of it, and I'm just sort of dotting in some texture, almost like speckling, concentrating it more towards the point of the feet as it touches the ground, so they'll be a little bit more focused, making it a little bit darker down there, and then slightly further up they'll become a little bit more sparse, a little bit more spread out, and this just sort of gives the impression of a bit of rough texture and colouring to the legs. I don't do this on the other parts of the body. This is just something that I wanted down on the feet, and then I do a similar thing again on his back carapace. So I'll get on with this and catch you guys back in just a bit. Okay, so next up I'm now taking some Incubi Darkness, and as you can see here, this bit was a little bit of an experimentation on the blade, but this is thinned down, and I'm trying to use that sort of speckling effect along the blade. I wasn't too happy with this on the claws, so I go back over with a smooth coat of thinned down Incubi Darkness and just blend it all in a very similar fashion to how I did with the Screaming Bell. So slightly lighter at the tips, letting that silver show through a little bit, and then a little bit darker and more concentrated as it joins onto his hand. Okay, so using the same stippling effect as I did with the Screaming Bell, I'm now doing it with the Incubi Darkness on his back carapace piece. So I've left the front side of the orb there silver, and then starting with fairly spaced out essentially dots of varying sizes, I concentrate them as we get further back down the plate here. I'll go over this a couple of times just to get the the dots varying, obviously waiting between layers for it to dry. And what this will do is, as you know, one dot goes over another, you'll get that slightly more concentrated area where the two sort of merge a little bit. And this just gives again a sort of a textured effect to the carapace. Once I'm happy with how much speckling there is, I'll then go over with a very thin down glaze from front to back, just to smooth out and blend those dots in together a little bit, just to tie them in and stop them looking so rough and separated. You'll notice on the his arm that has the blade on it, I've gone ahead as well and thinly glazed in some of this Incubi Darkness over some sections of that, and I'll also do the same with his gun. If you want to see in detail you know, this model with how this looks at the end, then I'll post a link down for my Instagram down below. You can go and check that out on there. I'll have a photo of him so you can see in a little bit more detail of the overall effect that I go for. Obviously it's a little bit hard to get this on camera, especially when I don't have professional filming equipment. Hopefully I'll get there someday, but for now, you know, you have to work with what you got really. So we'll get on with this and come back and see what I go for the next stage. Okay, so here's a little bit more progress into the stippling and glazing effect. You can see here, again, I'm going back over after I'd glazed, just to add in a few more dots, just to get that that blend up. This, I believe, was I've added a little bit of black into the Incubi Darkness now, just to darken it up a touch, so that I can get that slightly darker stippling over the top of the slightly lighter one that was under the glaze. Again, just to give it, you know, a varying in texture. And obviously you can see here I'm trying to sort of neaten up these claws a little bit. Again, getting this slightly darker stippling concentrated down towards the base, and then sparingly as it comes towards the tips. For the speckling side of it, it is just the claws and the back carapace I use on this. The rest of the weapons and the sash piece that he has at the front are done with a couple of glazes, using the silver to pop through the Incubi Darkness and give it that nice sort of metallic blue, that dark metallic blue look. Okay, so once I'm happy with the look of the Incubi Darkness, I'm now taking some non-oil and just running this into all of the recesses using a size 0 brush. This is just so I can get, you know, a small pool on the bristles that I can run right down into the recesses without staining the rest of the model. Obviously I don't want to darken up any of that Incubi Darkness, otherwise it will hide that sort of metallic look. One thing to mention, after spray painting this with the silver and letting it dry, before I started painting I did give it an all over wash of non-oil, just to tone down the shininess and the chrome look of the metallic paint a little, just to dull it down slightly. Obviously focusing it into recesses and things like that, and then on flat surfaces just trying to put it across just to leave a slight matte effect or a matte look on those metallic areas. So all I'm doing here is just picking off the sort of the battle damage that has been modelled into this, you know, the various scratches and dents and cracks and things like that, and then obviously anywhere sort of around these orbs and along this, you know, the armour and that, we've got these recesses and sort of lines and things like that, just to darken all those up, get a nice black shade in there. Okay, so once all the black lining has obviously dried, I'm now taking some ceramite white, and I'm applying this to the blade here in preparation for the black to green glow effect that I'll have on the blade. What I will be doing, guys, instead of showing how to do the cryptex in a full video, because obviously they're going to essentially be exactly the same as this, what I'll do for that is a more concentrated in-depth video on how I paint up these blades and how I blend them. That way I don't take too long on this video showing you guys. I can make that as a separate shorter video focusing just on the blade itself. But essentially what I'm doing first is getting a nice even white layer of paint down, and then once I know where my dark areas will be, I'll then obviously blend that in with a thin down black, glazing up to dark. The reason I do it with a white base and then glaze the black over the top is it's a lot easier to get a smooth transition from that white to black than it is the black to white. Going black over the top of white is a lot easier than doing white over the top of black. So obviously I'm trying not to get the paint in the recesses here, but if I do, then I'll go back in with some Nuln Oil and neaten that up once the blade is finished. But for now I'm just applying this white. What I'll also do at this point is go in, and any of the orbs or anything else that is going to have a green glow to it, I'll paint that in with a couple of coats of the ceramite white to get that nice and pure, ready for the glow effect to go over the top. So I'll get on with this, and then we'll come back in and have a look how I do the blade in a very quick detail. Okay, so once the white is applied to the blade and it's nice and clean, I'm now taking some thinned down black and choosing where I've previously chosen where I want the majority of the black to sit, which on the bottom half of the blade is going to be the outside edges, and on the top half of the blade nearer to where it joins to his arm is going to be the inside. The way that I do this is, as I say, a thin down black, and just starting about 2/3 of the way up the blade and pulling it down towards where the black will be. You can see on the lower part there where it deposited the black at the base there. So always pulling away from the lighter area, and then as that lightens up, that will or as that dries, sorry, that will lighten up and get a slightly, a bit more of a smooth transition. What I will then start to do is, once I have that gradient, I'll then start to touch into the white that is on my palette slightly, just to get a slight grey, and I'll slowly start glazing over that mid-tone or that mid-line where you'll get the transition. Sometimes it won't be quite as smooth as I want. So with the grey, obviously bearing in mind that it is thinned down, I can then glaze over that and work my way up essentially to the black. What I want is a pure, almost pure black on the outside, for I'd say about a fifth of the way in towards the middle, from either end, and then that will gradually get lighter until the center portion, or the center fifth, will be pure white, and then obviously the 3/5 in the middle of that white and that black will be that transition. So I'll go on and finish this, and we'll come back when I start to apply the greens over the top. Okay, so you can see here that I've pretty much got a black transition, or a transition from black to white. It's not 100% perfect, but it's enough that once this green glaze goes over the top, it will blend and hide that that transition. So for this first layer or first glaze, I'm using some Warpstone Glow, and again this is thinned down, and what I'm looking to do here is get an almost opaque Warpstone Glow where the most solid white is, and then obviously blend that up to the majority of the black. So I'm stopping just shy of the end, just as I get into that solid dark black, and obviously I want to build that up. Now you don't want to go opaque over the black because that will leave a harsh green line rather than a transition. The only opaque area that you want is essentially the white. So like I say, this is going to be multiple layers. When I come to doing the more in-depth video, that will be uncut but sped up so we can go through it without the video taking too long, but you'll be able to see exactly how I work with the glazing. And you can see here I'm using a couple of different sort of techniques and styles to paint. One will be pulling the brush sideways up into the black, and then you'll see me doing what I'm doing now, where I'm sort of up and down motion with the point of the bristles to maneuver that glaze and that watered down paint to how I want it. By doing this, I can pull down off of the blade, and that will remove any excess rather than having it pull anywhere. Whereas if you use the side of the brush and pull up to an end and then off, you tend to get a bit of a pooling where the bristles leave the blade. So again, I'll get on with this, and then we'll come to look at the next step of completing this blade. Right, so now that the Warpstone Glow is applied to the way that I want it, I'm now coming in with some Moot Green, and this is going to be one of my lighter points. So again, starting where that bright white would have been, I'm now using this slightly thinned down, not quite to a glaze consistency, it's a little bit thicker than that, but I'm now using a bit more of a blending technique as I get towards that sort of pure Warpstone. I'll be mixing a slight bit of the Warpstone Glow into the Moot Green, and I can get that to blend in a little bit. So it's a kind of a mix of glazes and blending, using the brush to get the blend on the wet palette. So you can see here, as I pull from the dark area, I'm using the side of the brush, and if I'm going backwards into that dark area, I'll use the up down motion, so that I'm not using any deposited leaving any large deposit in the area that I want to blend. Obviously not forgetting the edges and the blade part of the blade itself, and then the end here as well as the top. I want to get that smooth blend and transition all around the blade. Right, so I'm now using the Moot Green to edge highlight all of obviously the edges of the blade, the sharp edges, as well as the center line that splits the top and the bottom halves of the blade, where you've got that sort of recess cut in around the circle, and joining and making that sort of Necron pattern. So anywhere where there's an edge, I'll be lining it with this Moot Green, slightly thinned down so that it applies a little bit easier, but not too thin that it's going to run into the recess. It's just to get it to flow off the bristles a little bit better. Right, and for the final effect on the blade, I'm now using one of the, in my opinion, best paints for glows that Games Workshop have released, and that is Tesseract Glow. I cannot recommend this highly enough for any kind of glow effect. I really do hope that they take the same paint and do it in a couple of other colours, something like maybe a red and a blue, which I think would work great for plasma glows on plasma guns and things like that. It's a great paint, really vibrant, gives that nice glow effect when applied over white or a brighter version of itself. As you can see here, I'm going over the moot green that was paled down with a little bit of white towards the outside edges in the centre there, so that when this goes over the top, it just gives that brilliant, bright, vibrant glow. And then obviously going throughout the rest of the model now, applying this to all of those white areas. With the gun here, I'm being a little bit generous with it, so that it slightly goes onto the edges, giving that slight glow effect onto the the weapon itself. A little bit into his eyes, anywhere that's going to be glowing. So I've got obviously the orbs, and then a few of the pipes. But if you are painting Necrons and you are going with the green weapons and the green glow, then I do highly recommend Tesseract Glow. It's much easier than having to go in and layer up with various paints. Just throw down a white coat, throw this over the top, and you're pretty much sorted. Obviously, with exception to the blades, you'll want to put a little bit of work in, as I showed you with this guy. Excuse me. So I'll get on with this, and we'll be back in just a bit. Okay, so next up, I've now taken some Retributor armour, and just applying this to the chest plate here that has the Necron glyphs on there, and obviously the Necron symbol in the middle, just to get a slight variation to the screaming bell, just to make it stand out a little bit. This I do on all my Necron officers. It's only the warriors that don't have this, and obviously they have the Incubi Darkness glaze put into the middle to have that contrast. Also, you'll notice that with this guy, I've painted his I'm not sure what you call it, but the loincloth type thing at the front, with the Incubi Darkness. Compared to the Overlord and the Warden, I did that in gold for them. Although he's a Skorphek Lord, I want to keep the gold to a minimum on everything that isn't some kind of hierarchy officer. So I instead went for the Incubi Darkness look, just to obviously separate him from those guys a little bit. So once this gold's done, I'll come back, we can have a look at what I did next. Okay, so I'm now taking some Skorphek green and using this as my main highlight for the Incubi Darkness. So just an edge highlight of obviously anywhere that has the Incubi Darkness, so all over the weapon, along the outer edges of this the back carapace, and the edges of the joints that fit to his blade, and then obviously the tops of the claws and things like that. If there are any cracks and things like that in the armour, then I'm edge lining that as well, just to make those stand out a little bit more. Obviously they've got the non-oil wash into them, so now I'm just making them stand out a little bit more with the Skorphek green. Okay, so I'm now taking some lead belcher and just applying this into some of these larger cracks and recesses, just to show that that's eaten a little bit more into the metal. So obviously this is the undertone of the metal, and then I'll take some Stormhost silver and I'll go around and edge highlight all of these chips and cracks, in the silver areas with that, as well as some of the sharp edges along the tops of the silver and also the bottom of the screaming bell, as you can see here. So just picking out any of the edges, edge of the armour, edges of these lines that cut through the armour, and obviously any of the scratches and chips and things like that. So this is just to make him look a little bit more worn and you know, just a little bit more chipped and beaten up. So not too much of a difficult model this. I do love the Necrons for this reason. They're probably one of the easiest armies I've ever found to paint, even with the glazing style that I use here. Obviously it takes a little bit longer than if I was going with a straight opaque colour, or say leaving the metal just, you know, bare metal rather than doing the screaming pelt glaze. But I do think that it gives a nice look, and yeah, definitely also one of my more favourite models from the Indomitus set, the Necron side at least, this Skorphek Lord. Can't wait to paint up the Skorpheks themselves. Right, and with that, the Skorphek Lord is finished. And like I said, nothing too complicated with these guys. If you want to check out a bit more detailed photo, like I said, I've got my Instagram link down in the description below. You can go and check that out. And while you're there, be nice if you could follow me on Instagram as well. So yeah, that brings us to the end of today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, please consider subscribing. That way you get notifications of when new videos go up live. For Indomitus series, it's every Wednesday or Thursday, and for the Mortal Realms series that I'm doing is every Monday. So once again, thanks a lot for joining me, guys, and until next time, keep painting those minis.